All right. I think we're live. Thank you, Shannon, and the team at Podcast Movement University. I'm Zach, the co-founder and CEO of Squadcast.fm, and I'm glad I was invited to have this presentation for you today, the evolution of remote recording. We'll start from the top and work our way through the different ways that people have, found creative solutions to record together audio and video when they're not in the same studio, when they're not in the same room. Squadcast, we work on that very problem, but by no means were we the first to approach this challenge of recording remotely. And we're here today because we're students of the attempts, the solutions that have come before us, and that's really where we are proud to have innovated from that place, which we'll get to. So yeah, thanks for this opportunity. And like I said, Zach, the co-founder. Oh, let me start from the top. Yeah, evolution of remote recording. I should also say that this presentation will be recorded. If you jump in at any point, that'll be part of the Podcast Movement University, and you'll see some info below about that. So yeah, I'm Zach, the co-founder and CEO of Squadcast. I'm also the host of a show called Between Two Mics, a podcast where we explore what's possible in podcasting and talk to innovators who are out on the edges, pushing the boundaries of that. And that's called Between Two Mics, the remote recording podcast, where my co-founder Rock and I, we have weekly episodes. Check that out. So what do we do at Squadcast? We're proud to serve content creators with a set of tools and platform to make it easy and fun to record very high studio quality podcast and video content from anywhere in the world. So over a decade was recorded last year on the platform. We're very proud of. We added video recording at the beginning of this year, and we've already seen some amazing content be created from over 130 countries around the world. So we're super proud to be able to serve creators with that. And as I said, there's been a lot of evolution. This being podcasting and audio recording more generally. We're very much students of the technology that has come before, like radio and these different formats have come before podcasting, but they're all generally some form of technology. So therefore, technology, evolves over time and hopefully is moving in the right direction to serve people for different challenges that they face, given the production that they're working on. So there have been a lot of steps in the evolution here, and just like quick hot take, we're just getting started with what's possible in remote recording, and we'll look at what we have coming in the future. But a bit of a summary. Our structure here for today is a brief history, as I said. And some of the research that we've done, and then we'll get into the state of the art as it is kind of today, and where things have evolved to serve creators, given the constraints of shelter in place, the different challenges that we face. How have the solutions for recording remotely, remote content production, as you'll hear me refer to it, like how does that work today, given kind of the superpowers of the internet and these devices that we have, and we'll get into all of that. And my favorite part is the future. We'll take a look at what's coming and kind of what we have as far as new challenges and how solutions like Squadcast are rising to the occasion and innovating from the past, present, and on into the future. Stick around. We got some free stuff. We have the full hour, but I kind of doubt that I'll use up that much of your time. I respect your time and appreciate you joining me today. So we have questions. We'll have some questions available too at the end. And I'm a resource, of course, for remote recording and Squadcast, but I'm also a fan and creator and student of podcasting and content creation and just the whole web as a whole. I'm a software engineer, kind of in a past life. So if you need help with your website or your podcast or any of that stuff, happy to be a resource. Okay, so to start from the top, you may have heard this not a very creative or hip term. This double ender is something that you'll see referred to in content where people are talking about how they approach, especially the more established, like we'll call it, enterprise creators, with access to a recording studio. That's really where you start to see these double ender style recordings coming into place, and there's a big requirement here of, let's say you're only recording a one-to-one conversation with you and another person. Let's say I'm in Oakland, California, and I'm interviewing our community manager, Ariel. Hi, Ariel, is in New York. So let's say we want us to record this conversation remotely. We want to sound good, and we're going to go with kind of the first solution here, the double ender. We would both kind of need to reserve time at a physical recording studio. So I'd have to kind of look at my phone book, I suppose, look on my phone and find a recording studio. There's a bunch of great ones here in Oakland. There's one right off of Broadway that has really, really awesome engineers there. And that's probably where I'd go. Ariel would go like maybe Gotham Podcast Studios, High Gotham. And we would establish a conversation probably over a phone call. So a landline, I would call Ariel. And then we would have these recording studios, right? So we have equipment in there with like reel-to-reel tapes, let's say, to go way back. The New York Phonograph Company was founded in 1889, and that was the first documented recording studio, like business, like brick and mortar. Like you go in there and for the purpose of recording audio. So that's kind of as far back as I've been able to find in my research. I wasn't able to find the second recording studio that was opened in history, but I guess that would have been the first time this would have been possible. So back in the 1800s, farther back than I thought when I first started digging in here. And we would have reel-to-reel tape recorders, and we'd probably clap, have our conversation. We would both record ourselves, so probably engineers would hit record on both of our equipment. Probably clap, and then we'd have our conversation, and then at the end we'd walk away. We'd walk away with 2 reels of tape. One would probably put their reel of tape in a package and mail that across the country, where then engineers would start physically cutting that tape and mixing it down into our conversation. So this is pretty laborious, right? It requires physical recording studios, which are infrastructure that we may or may not have access to, especially given the global nature of podcasting. But all of these approaches, to zoom out for a second, all of these approaches I'm going to go through for you today, there's still people who do this. Technology, there's still people who listen to like vinyl records, right? Like prior generations of technology never fully go away, despite what tech journalists may write about, but they always kind of stick around. Like I have some cassettes, right? I have a cassette player. My grandfather has an 8-track in his classic car, right? These technologies kind of stick around. So you can still record in this way if you have access to a physical recording studio. Your guest has access to a physical recording studio. Things have gotten a little easier with digital to move these files around. But in principle, it's still the same approach. So that's what a double ender is you can think of it as 2 people on either end of that phone call or that conversation, and then you're recording it kind of in 2 places or n number of places, depending on how many people you have in your conversation. So the complexity, grows from there. So that's a double ender, and it gets the job done. But as I said, there's some pros and cons. It's expensive. It's laborious. It takes time. You're dependent on, I guess, the U.S. Postal Service, or whoever's going to move that package for you, and on, right? You can see where that gets complex. So then I mentioned a bit there about the phone call, right? Like the call was part of that double ender. But the next chapter here is on actually just recording the call itself, right? Not a separate reel-to-reel recorder from that conversation, but actually just like the signal traveling over those phone lines, that's a legit audio signal, right? So you can record that. And in my research, the first phone call was made in 1876, and the patent was filed that year. That first call, I wish it were recorded. It was not recorded, although it was like I think Bell talking to somebody on his staff. But that was not recorded. That was a recording is separate from the conversation, right? So that's where the technology took a little bit of time to catch up. To say how do I record this audio signal that we're sending over these wires, right? So the record I could find was 1885, and all these slides have links, by the way. I know they're small, but that should help find the source. And so a couple years later, almost a decade later, the first call was recorded, and then that technology was pretty much the same up until the developments of like ISDN and fiber in the 1980s. So those are the relevant dates here for this particular approach, this call recording. But let's say same example. I call Ariel from Oakland to New York, and we have this phone call, and I can set up like a recorder on my end, right? Similar to, I guess, like voicemail used to be a thing, or maybe still is for some landline folks, and you can record that signal either digitally or analog, and analog first, of course, and then digital. And you could capture that, and then you have that audio, right? So this is where you start to get people like calling into radio stations and things like that, right? So to look at kind of the pros and cons, contrast from our previous solution of the double ender, how does that compare to call recording? Well, calls are notoriously low fidelity audio signals because they travel around the world, right? The amount of kind of data lost in that network transaction is sometimes substantial. So that, and to save money, and the sweet spot that people have found, engineers have found over time, is this like 8 kilohertz sample rate. That is what typical phone calls are at. I couldn't find any examples of what the original kind of phone calls, what the sample rate would have been. I don't even know if that would have had that level of sophistication to measure the signal back then. Possibly, but couldn't find a record. So 8 kilohertz sample rate compared to like reel to reel in a physical studio, while that may be a more laborious task, you're going to get studio sound, right? You're going to get the equivalent of if you were just recording solo in that studio. But there's all this work kind of after the fact, these logistics of sending those tapes around and stuff. So the call recorder has that benefit where that signal already traveled in either direction, and you can record it on one side of that conversation. But because the signal was sent over these wires long distances, that in transit time is where the quality of that signal gets degraded, and you lose the fidelity kind of in transit, let's say, over the network. So there's kind of less workflow, let's say, less logistics of getting this type of recording done, but you're sacrificing the quality in a pretty major way. But as I said, it gets the job done. There are still folks that record calls. I've been on interviews where people called me. That's not my preference, of course, but I'm a bit biased, and it's a totally valid way that you can record conversations, but some major trade-offs to consider. And we can move on to kind of the more recent, the 2000s here. And this is maybe where a lot of the people in the podcast movement community come into the picture because of kind of the history of podcasting, right? Skype was a thing for a few years before podcasting really started to kind of have its day. And now we're not having these phone calls, right? We have the internet. So we have a different form of network. Back in dial-up, they're kind of the same, but infrastructure has evolved, right? By this point in the 2000s, to have some fiber, some other things to speed up and have increased bandwidth over the web. So you start to see voice over IP solutions to these challenges of how do I have a long distance conversation? Like, it kind of blows my mind in respect to Skype for innovating here. Like, I used to see in California anyway, commercials for like long distance phone calls, right? Like, that had its own like billing for it. Like, it's kind of crazy compared to what we have today. But Skype's major contribution innovation was that you have an internet connection, you can call somebody over the web, and you don't have to deal with long distance phone call providers. Like, that's just not really a thing anymore. So respect to the team at Skype for that innovation. And that was started in around 2003. And then our friends at PodClear, the first podcast specific way to record remotely that I could find in my research. And thank you to Spencer and some of the team there for meeting with us to help kind of give us their picture of history here. But PodClear was founded years after Skype, but it was kind of a complementary thing. So you would use Skype plus PodClear, and then you could record that conversation similar to the phone call. And we don't hear about PodClear today because they were acquired by an app called Blab, a company called Blab in 2015. And Blab, unfortunately, is no longer with us as a startup. So I know I have a lot of friends in the podcast community who this was their setup. This was, they loved Blab, they loved PodClear, but to kind of get into the specifics here of like, what's my actual workflow, right? I have some efficiency gains because now I don't have to use the phone lines. I can use my internet connection. I have Skype. That's pretty easy to just type somebody's name in and call them. And I have PodClear to record that conversation. How does this all fit together? So just theoretically, to go back to that example, right? Like Ariel and I would both need an account with Skype. I guess today, Microsoft, we would need some sort of account. And then you would both install PodClear. So you would install Skype, you would install PodClear, you would sign in to these things, and then you would call each other through Skype, just kind of normal Skype process at that point. And then you would click record in PodClear. And PodClear would record that conversation for you that was actually taking place over the infrastructure as Skype, as we'll call, like, the conversation was happening on Skype, the recording was happening in PodClear. I know this is a lot, but this is what the kind of state of the art was for a while. So respect to people in the early 2000s who were podcasting with this setup. This is a lot of wiring. Like, let's just be straight up about that. And you got to install stuff. Like, is that compatible with your machine? On and on and on, right? So this gets the job done, though. So what are the trade-offs that we start to see compared to maybe the double ender we looked at, right? We looked at the call recording, and now we have this like Skype-based solution here. This is a lot of wiring, as I said, and it's dependent on the internet for the first time. So what happens, right? It kind of somewhere in between the two of, like, the quality was the biggest, delta between the brick and mortar double ender versus the call recorder, right? The big ends of the spectrum, a wide gap between the quality there. This solution kind of comes in the middle, where the quality can fluctuate with your internet connection, which I like to make the analogy can be kind of like the weather. Like, it's a bit difficult to predict. We're impacted by the other people on the network, like our neighbors or other people in our house that are sharing that connection with us. Think of it like a pie, and we're all getting a slice of it. But if your slice gets to be pretty thin, then Skype's quality is going to fluctuate and go down and then maybe come back up if you kind of catches its breath. I think it's well documented, the quality concerns with Skype. You get kind of degradation, compression, like robotic sounding voices, just cutouts, dropouts, all that stuff. And you're kind of at the mercy of that, right? Like, your quality is tightly coupled, let's say, is directly connected to the quality of your internet connection. And at this point in time, the early 2000s, our internet connections were they're not what they are today. Let's say we've come a long way. This being technology, so that's really really kind of a shame, right? And we're focused as podcasters on growing our audience, and it's well documented how quality impacts the experience of our audience and how they kind of correlate the credibility of your all-star guest and you as a creator. So we want to deliver a quality product to our audience, our customers these days. If you're doing premium content, is like, important to us. So this setup, while it does kind of add some convenience factors of being over the internet versus over the phone lines or going into a physical studio, it leaves a lot to be desired, right? And you end up with some side effects. So that's really, where this approach of the web double ender comes in. And Squadcast was founded in 2016. And we are proud to be, innovators in this, to kind of pick up this story and continue moving it forward. So a couple things to draw this distinction is that Squadcast is the first solution that wasn't dependent on Skype or something else like that to have this real-time audio video conversation. You truly just go to a website or click a link, send a link to someone else, and connect and record. There's no other Skype. There's no other anything else. There's no need for like Dropbox to move these files around. It's an all-in-one connect, record, and kind of manage those files. So we started calling that like a web double ender approach because it leans on that first approach, because that gets us that we covered today, the brick and mortar physical studio double ender. Like if we look at that for the pros that are there, it's the highest quality option that we've covered, right? That has existed in this story. So, how can we kind of retain the quality gains there, but make it just as easy as clicking a link, right? Without needing to install any software, no accounts, no file management, no USPS to put that tape in the mail, none of that, right? Let's just connect people and record, and walk away with the same or better quality as our brick and mortar solution we covered in the beginning. So that is kind of a way to have our cake and eat it too. And when we first started Squadcast, or even before it was a company or anything like that, that was our question, was like, is it possible to kind of have quality and ease of use and reliability of that you get from the web? That's really what we set out to build, and I'm glad, I'm proud to say, celebrated our 5th birthday recently. So this approach, worked out, and it actually has led us to create some intellectual property, some patents that we're proud to have pending that make our platform unique here in the industry. And I'll get into some of the specifics there, but this is, something we're very proud of. And but it's by no means, this was the start of the Squadcast story. And we want to look ahead as to where we're going from here. So let's first though take a pause at kind of what is the state of the art? What is the state of the art today? And it was really an evolution. You could look at kind of chapter 1 was the web double ender. But we've evolved into this cloud studio solution where we started with audio and we've innovated there, but our most requested feature was video. So we added that and have, 1080p local HD video recordings for everybody in a conversation as of January this year. So you can have the same experience of how easy it was to connect and record, and also just walk away with those video files in addition to audio if that's in your workflow. So we're proud of that. Some of the innovations that I mentioned that are specific to Squadcast are how we approach uploads. You don't need to wait around for a file to be available to you after you click the stop button, the stop recording. Any other platforms out there that want to use the similar terms that Squadcast coined, like progressive upload, that's fine. But how you watching and listening to this, how you can tell the difference is, did I have to wait for a file? Like, did I like, was I worried I was going to get my file after? Like, was there any kind of waiting around for that? That's just not a thing on Squadcast. And I think that's really, the proof is in the pudding there for progressive upload. So we're very proud of that. And that helps you have confidence that you are going to get your file when you're done recording. These are important conversations that we're capturing, right? So I want to make sure that the quality for sure is there, but if I say I could give you like the best quality file that ever existed, but I never actually deliver it to you, that's kind of a problem, right? So that's really where we focus on our innovations, is to be the most reliable and fast and easy experience there, even in a worst case scenario, right? Think about if the power goes out or the network goes down. So our approach, progressive upload, is unique to Squadcast, and that's one of our patents. And yeah, as I said, you can test it that way, to just get your files super quickly. And even if the power goes out, it'll be there for you. So the other pieces are this issue that can arise once you kind of start recording locally, like that web double ender style. You run into challenges with the time syncing, like drift between the timing of multiple speakers can slip out of sync. And this is our second patent pending around our solution to audio drift. We also have video now on the platform. So, we've all seen like old Kung Fu movies where like the audio and video may be out of sync, and that's incredibly distracting as well. So there's a bunch of different kind of time syncing things that are unique about Squadcast, and long story short, your stuff's going to line up for you, and that's going to make your post-production, your process, your workflow there a lot faster, and you can further invest that time into like production value, not kind of fixing things that shouldn't be broken in the first place. So then, moving on, we've been the first to add cloud backups, our cloud recording engine, in addition to our local recording engine. We call this premium recordings, kind of the two combined of local and cloud, give us even another level of reliability there. And we're proud to see that this has been embraced as an emerging kind of standard amongst others who are contributing to the solutions for remote recording. But we're proud to be the first to innovate there. And in another thing that I mentioned, workflow, the integration possibilities of this being a web-based technology. We can integrate, with fantastic partners. Like we just announced an integration with Captivate, and Camo and Zapier and Dropbox, right? So we have all these integrations that depend on our public API, which is also accessible. If you're a software engineer or a developer, you kind of have that low level access too. But if you're not, you have Zapier. You can set up these integrations and really enhance your workflow. So all of these things, I think, are embodiments of the current state of the art of the cloud recording studio. And we're super proud of these innovations, and yeah, on and on about that. So then let's start to kind of point our telescopes and look into the future. Where are we going from here, and why? Like these things didn't just show up in my slide deck because I can see the future. No, that's not our style. We're big on listening and talking with the community. We're proud that we were just able to contribute and sponsor to the She Podcast Live event in Arizona. That was awesome, and got some really great insights from the creators that we're proud to serve there. And that's really led us in some of the directions I'll share here, which you'll see coming to Squadcast in the near future here. So this shorthand we call teams and shows. Like what does that really mean? We've talked about this a little bit in the past, but as we've grown, we're proud to serve organizations like Microsoft and ESPN and Vox and Marvel, right? And these organizations have multiple shows and teams that collaborate across these different shows, and sometimes for in collaboration with other organizations. So the Squadcast, our mission at Squadcast is to amplify collaboration, and we're doing, I think, a great job if you're focused on the studio, right, the production itself. we are doing amazing things that we saw in the previous slides, right? Like in the studio, but then there's kind of the pre-production and post-production and different people in different roles that are collaborating on these productions. So we're proud to be contributing members to the podcast taxonomy group, and we looked at this and thought, cool, let's empower those forms of collaboration, not just in the studio. We'll get into some future leaning stuff there, but across pre-production, production, and post-production, with shared access for many people to collaborate across many shows, and this has workflow improvements as well that we're proud to you can imagine when you're done recording that we notify your producer, and your producer has access and they can go in and get those files. And when you schedule with a new guest, let's say on SavvyCal or Calendly, that gets scheduled automatically into Squadcast and maybe notifies your team to start getting some pre-production materials together. These are just some examples of what we're excited about when we say teams and shows. This is kind of what we mean. Okay, so then moving on to the to what we're calling backstage, Squadcast Backstage is looking into how can we continue to amplify collaboration in the studio, in the recording process itself, right? That's really what we focus on today. So how can we improve from there? Well, we're bringing these teams into the fold with what I just was talking about, but that really splits into two different teams. You have the production team, and you have the guest team. Your guest may or may not come with like their PR person or their attorney, or just somebody who's on their team, and we want to empower those forms of collaboration as well, all without being a distraction to the conversation, right? So we're being very mindful of the flowing dialogue as we're designing these experiences, but we're excited to open up this backstage experience for both your production team and your guest VIP access team to be kind of passive participants in the conversation. Like on the production side, it's kind of managing everybody who's invited. Is everybody here? Does everybody sound great? Am I getting the files as I expect them? Progressive upload, right? I can get insight into that as soon as you click record. So what would a producer want to see? What would an audio engineer or a fact checker want to contribute to a conversation without being a distraction? So we're really, really excited about this backstage experience and what this is going to unlock as far as new forms of collaboration. And we've the final piece here with backstage is that we've always had chat, right? We've always had chat on Squadcast, so you can let's say if somebody's microphone or headphones aren't necessarily like dialed in yet, you have chat to kind of communicate even in those scenarios. That's like the boring example, but you can share emojis and links and supplemental kind of notes and things like that throughout the conversation without necessarily needing to use your voice, which is what we're recording on Squadcast. So that's kind of a nice superpower, a secondary form of communication that's built in for you. But we asked ourselves, like, does this really scale with bringing in all these additional contributors, these production team, guest team? I'm going to have a lot more people, right, in my production. While I may not be distracted by them, they still need to communicate. Like, you still need some form of communication, right? So that we're expanding our chat in a really, really meaningful, exciting way to have threads. So we'll have kind of an everybody thread. We'll have, a production team, a guest team, like on stage. Some of these groups are kind of already forming when you set up your recording session here in the near future. You'll be able to say who's who, right? And who has access, and invite them to come along for the production. So we're really excited about expanding chat in, and I think Slack does a really great job of this. Our team is remote, so we use Slack. So you can think of it kind of like that, like a Slack-like threaded experience with some really fun things like not just emojis anymore, but like reactions and deeper forms of engagement there. So really, really, really stoked about Backstage, and And just kind of as a teaser, if you're following along with our Squadcast story, like Backstage is just the phase 1 of Backstage is what we're looking at here today. I'll keep you in suspense for phase 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and all that. So look out for that. And then other forms of content creation, right? We added video recording. We started with audio. People asked us for video. That's awesome. And we asked ourselves, like, what other forms of content can we help people collaborate on and create remotely? And we have this amazing effort in our community. I mentioned Ariel before. This was Ariel's idea to have these squad shots. And these squad shots are something that's already happening on Instagram. If you like go and look at our Squadcast FM Instagram account and look at our stories or look at our feed, you'll see people connected with their guests. I'm trying to think of a great example, right? Like, let's see. Okay, so Rock and I interviewed Elsie and Jess, the founders of She Podcast Live, and we had a great episode on Between Two Mics about their upcoming event. And like, we took a picture together. I took a screenshot of Squadcast of us connected and shared that, right? And this is a way that you can hype your episode and share that on social media, maybe before the episode drops. And it's also just another format, another form of content, right? In addition to the audio and video. So now I have the ability to take photos with myself and my guest, right? So this is something that people are already doing, and our app is just going to empower this and make this a lot easier to do with just kind of a click of a button. You can take those photos together and share that on social media. If you kind of tag Squadcast in that, we love to promote, the content that creators are collaborating and creating on our platform. So that'll come kind of baked in for you. And then, as I said, you can use this to hype your episodes before they're released. You can share, hey, this is upcoming, right? I have this episode upcoming with Esprit or whoever it is, right? That I'm really excited about, and I want to kind of plant that seed so that when my audience sees that show up in their Spotify or Apple podcast app, that, they'll be primed for that. So that's what we call squad shots. That kind of already exists, and we're excited to bring that into the product as just another form of content creation that we can collaborate on remotely. Okay, that was a lot. So to recap, we walked through the brief history of different approaches to solving some of the challenges with recording remotely and how to sound and look good there. And just to recap that, we looked at the kind of brick and mortar double ender style recording. We looked at the call recording, and then we looked at kind of the web double ender and the cloud recording studio as kind of the state of the art. And then we looked at that state of the art and said, okay, cool. What are some of the things that we can kind of bring into the experience that are not possible and brick and mortar, not possible on the phone? How do we bring that into the recording experience? And that's really what has become a full-featured studio. But we're not stopping at the studio, right? There's other forms of collaboration with Backstage that we talked about, with teams and shows, and with squad shots. So that's a look at the future of what we're excited about on the Squadcast platform. And, we're just really grateful and excited that we can play a part in this story of innovation. And we think that there's a lot of opportunity still out in front of us to innovate and serve the creators in the podcast community in new ways. So with that, I appreciate your time very much joining us today. We have some free stuff, as I shared. So if you use the promo code PODMOVEOCT for October, PODMOVEOctober, while you're checking out on Squadcast, that'll get you $50 off whatever plan you choose. Audio, video recording, however much recording time you need. We're proud to help you with that. If you need any resources, we have a ton of content. I mentioned our podcast, we have our YouTube channel, our blog. We're a technology company, but we're also real people in the podcast community, also creators alongside you. So reach out to us on social media at SquadcastFM, wherever, email, support@squadcast.fm, or me. I shared my email earlier, Zach@squadcast.fm. We're happy to help with whatever your question is. So this will get you started. And this is in addition to our 7-day free trial. So with that, we'll open it up for questions, and that was a good amount of time. So let's see what we got as far as questions. Okay, from Michael. Thank you, Michael. Do you have any recommendations on tips for internet failover solutions? I'm thinking that having that properly set up would significantly drive down risks of lower audio quality or video quality. Yeah, this is interesting, and I guess it depends. My answer depends for you, Michael, on which approach to remote recording you're using, because I'll you say, so you said internet, so I'll assume at least web double ender or newer. What you're going to want is from your solution is this a separation of quality from connectivity, right? If your quality depends on your connectivity, like it does with Skype or Zoom or conversation first platforms, if those two things are essentially the same thing, like if your connection degrades, your quality degrades, and you see or hear that, that's kind of some indicator for you of, what does quality mean to the service that I'm using, and how important is it to them in their platform. So on Squadcast, these are two independent things. Your quality is always going to be consistently the industry standard high. We don't ever reduce the quality, nor do we need to, because of our approach to uploading. So progressive upload is kind of in the background while you're recording. It's moving that audio and video content up to the cloud in a reliable way, so that if your internet goes out or if your internet gets a little slower for a second, that's not ever going to impact the quality of the recordings that you're going to listen to after. So, I think in the past, like our friend Dave Jackson, right, is a member of this community, and the first time I think he used Squadcast, or one of the first times he used Squadcast, like he had a little bit of anxiety. He heard kind of his guest's voice get a little warbly, let's say, or Bugs Bunny, I think is the analogy that Dave likes. It started to sound a little bit like Bugs Bunny, and then, a couple seconds it caught up and went back to normal. But, Dave's an audiophile, I think it's fair to say, and cares about quality to that degree where he was a bit concerned. So then he, a couple minutes later, downloads those files and plays it back. And in Squadcast, there's that separation, right? The conversation is not necessarily what you're recording. And that's where the audio recording sounded perfect. There was no Bugs Bunny. There was none of that degradation in quality. So let's say that's kind of a middle ground. Let's say worst case scenario, right? I'm in California. There's an earthquake and the power goes out while I'm in the middle of a recording session for between two mics. Do I freak out? What do I do? No, I'm not going to freak out, because I'm recording on Squadcast, and because we have progressive upload, within a few second margin of error, my audio and video is already safe and sound in the cloud, not here on my computer in California where it can get destroyed or lost because the power is now out. It's already up in the cloud. So whenever I come back and regain my connectivity, my file's already there in entirety for you and your guests and everybody. And then in addition to that, we have backups, which are the actual conversation. So all this added together is a super reliable solution where, you don't need to necessarily worry about getting your file or not getting your file. You're going to get your recording, and you're going to get a couple different versions of it and formats of it at that. So that's really another way to say it. Your question about internet failover, that's a lot of what we focus on, is just making sure creators succeed in extreme examples of like recording from like a hot spot on a boat in the middle of the Caribbean, right? Like sounds like an extreme example, and it is, but this is real. I have emails from people talking to me about this, and Squadcast still delivering in those experiences. So that's kind of what I look for, is like, do we succeed in everyday situations, but also those extreme situations. Like I think of it, I'm a huge space nerd, as you can tell from my Lego rocket behind me. And and I'm a big fan of like redundancy, right? In engineering solutions, and that's how we make sure we deliver for you all the time. And this is not true of other of all remote recording solutions or some of the things that I've walked through today. So you just want to look out for some of these technologies in your in the solution of choice, and it's going to prioritize quality for you and your listeners. It's a great question. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, Zach, it looks like we're not having any more questions. So if anyone has any questions for Zach, just go ahead and leave them in the comments and he'll be happy to answer them. But I had a question for you from myself.
Yeah.
We're talking about the future of remote recording and all of that. What are some things in the future of podcasting in general that you look forward to? Like, where do you see the future of podcasting going?
Yeah, it's bigger than remote recording, right? Like this is part of the workflow. It is kind of it's centric to the workflow, but there's a lot of like pre-production, that exciting work like our friends at PodPal are doing. There's post-production work like our friends at Descript are doing. There's like distribution innovation with platforms like Simplecast or Captivate or Transistor, and and then consumption, whether that be like monetization, or like the actual listening experience, like something like Overcast or Spotify, even Clubhouse, I think might be considered in this conversation. So that's a broad picture of the landscape. To answer your question though, Shannon, where I'm most excited is around unlocking creativity for people who don't necessarily see themselves as content creators, right? Like content creators is kind of like a specific person who has focuses today. I think what's exciting about the future is as platforms like Squadcast or some of the others that I mentioned continue to innovate, this lowers the barrier to entry substantially so that anybody can contribute and make quality content and grow an audience and and have a path forward towards being a professional content creator. That's something that we've seen more and more of in the 5 years that we've been part of the industry. So I think that is a huge deal. And I even have some philosophical thoughts along these lines, but I'll kind of spare you, and maybe we can catch up at a future conference about why I think everybody is moving towards being content creators, personal branding, some of the things we already see today. There's value in that. One other kind of on the technology side, and I'm proud that we were just guests on a podcast called That Digital Show, one of the Google Cloud podcasts. Chris, the host, asked me a similar question, and this being a Google focused podcast, and I'm an ex-Googler, by the way. I did my internship, back in the day. So this was really important to me. Like, I think it would be awesome. All of these, and I wrote about this when we first started Squadcast, but it still hasn't happened. And there's some real reasons for that. But like everybody focuses on this category. Like we see Edison Research, right? The Infinite Dial Report. There's this new category of like smart speakers that wasn't necessarily a thing when we were like first getting started. And that is growing category of how people listen and consume audio as a format. But like we forget these things are also high-powered digital microphones arrays as well that have onboard machine learning that can do, background noise reduction and echo cancellation and a bunch of these things that, if I buy a $30 smart speaker, I'm in some ways getting a more sophisticated microphone than the one I'm talking into right now. But we don't think of them like that. We think of them as this is a speaker, right? Like it's only for consumption. And I think it's going to be awesome to unlock the creative potential of that device category and open up smart microphones to people who didn't even know they had them. And these answers are complementary to one another, because this is one way that people may think, oh, I don't have a microphone. I don't have a way to create content. I don't have a camera. You can get a $20, $30 smart microphone and record and sound awesome, right? Your phone probably has a camera on it, right? So an app like Camo can make that more accessible for you. So I think this is all these things are coalescing beautifully in service of, this continued collaboration, amplifying collaboration, and people being able to create content that previously it would have been inaccessible. To come back to one of my previous slides of like, can I afford to rent a physical recording studio for me and my guest in another city to record this double ender thing? Or, can I spend $10 a month on Squadcast and get better quality and not need any of those logistics or money, right? So I think that's what I'm proud of, our contribution here, but seeing the contributions from everybody across the industry is pretty incredible. And I've mentioned our podcast Between Two Mics a few times. This is exactly what we focus on. Like, we have some tagline, we have some text about it and stuff, but it's like, who's innovating in podcasting, and let's talk to them and how are they, moving it forward. So check that show out if you haven't already. And I appreciate your question very much, Shannon. I'll ask you the same question. What are you looking forward to in podcasting?
I think the same exact thing, getting people get their hands on an opportunity to get their voice out there. Everyone has a message they want to send to other people, and just giving them that opportunity to be able to give that message to 10 people or like 1,000 people, like someone out there would want to hear something that someone has to say. So just giving people an opportunity, whether it be like on their iPhone, like you said, like, we have all of this technology at our fingertips, and it is amazing to see it moving along.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. So it's a beautiful time to be a content creator. Like, we have, we're not at the beginning, and we have a long road ahead of us in front. So, respect to people who have recorded in the ways that we've touched on today. Like, people still do these things, and they have their merits, right? Like, that's why no technology ever truly goes away. But, we're at the same time, we're proud to kind of pick up the baton and innovate and make it more accessible to more people. Like, quality is not just a thing on like NPR's podcast or Vox podcast. It's everybody has this opportunity to grow their audience and sound professional, deliver professional sounding products to their audience so they can monetize and become more and more professional. So it's a lot to look forward to. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak here, because you have some amazing speakers and, exploring these very topics. So, I appreciate everybody who's innovating in the different ways that we've explored today. And thank you for that.
Absolutely. We are coming up on the top of the hour, but we usually close out every presentation with just any advice that you have to new podcasters or anyone in the podcasting field, really.
Yeah. I'll go general here just to make sure I'm meeting anybody where they're at. Sorry if you can hear that. I think my neighbor just decided to start using a power drill. Apologies. So advice. I would say the number one thing that often gets kind of podcasters, we all get really excited, right? I get this microphone, I get this headphones, I get some software like Squadcast or, Transistor to host my show and a website and all this stuff. We can overlook some things as in that excitement. Like, am I familiar with my microphone and all of the switches and settings that it has? Am I familiar with my MacBook Pro or my Mac Air or my iPad? Like, where are the audio and video settings on there so that I know I'm using the microphone that I invested in and it sounds good, right? So this is a pretty boring answer, but it's one that I see get overlooked over and over again. And it's just kind of knowing your equipment, knowing your settings. And that, we do a lot in our user experience work on Squadcast to make it approachable and accessible and easy to use, where, the best setting is no setting. But the audio equipment that we're using, the audio and video equipment that we're using, while it is accessible to us and at a price point that I can just, grab a pair of headphones and a microphone off of Amazon, that's not necessarily the same thing as like, Blue Yeti does not equal good sound. You still like have a knob on the back of there of like gain and polar pattern, headphones. Like, these are all little decisions that, contribute to your quality and are perfectly within your control. Like, I can't necessarily write any software that's going to tell you like, don't use your Yeti in a room that has a bunch of voices, and probably wear headphones with it so that you're not using speakers and getting that feedback, and probably put it on the omnipolar pattern, right? Like, these are all things that you as a podcaster can get pretty easily. It takes 5 minutes on YouTube to dial these things in, or Apple system preferences sound to say select Blue Yeti or whatever your microphone of choice is, right? So I think these are all little things that are probably pretty boring, and that's why they get overlooked. But think about you that doesn't know the stuff that I just rattled off versus you that does. How much more confident are you going to feel when you're having a conversation with your guest, that not needing to worry about, am I on the right polar pattern, or, is my microphone selected or whatever? Like, because you said it that way, right? And have taken a level of ownership over your equipment and your recording, your kind of recording signal chain, to use a super engineering word. So yeah, that's like what I see. I think can go a long way for podcasters. Whatever your equipment is, whatever your software is, wherever you're at, even if you're recording in person, or whatever your setup is, like, being familiar with your equipment goes a really long way towards your confidence as a creator, so that you don't need to worry about the wires and stuff, right? That's not why we're podcasting. I want to podcast because I have a message, I have a story, I want to connect with people, I want to hear their stories, I want to grow an audience, and I want to, serve the brands that I am passionate about, right? So that's really where I see the biggest opportunity for people to with some advice to help them get started.
Awesome. That was a great piece of advice.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Shannon.
No problem. Okay, so we're going to go.
Maybe I'll be back to talk about those boring topics and try to make them more entertaining for people.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Cool.
So we are going to go ahead and end this. You can watch the full playback recording of this presentation at university.podcastmovement.com. It's free to join, and all you need to do is enter your email and you're already in. So awesome. Thank you so much, Zach, for joining us, and I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you, Shannon. Appreciate it as well. Have a great day.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.